Rowley Library. The doors were open, the lights were on, and there was Miss Marion Todd sitting at the desk. And she had a stamp to stamp your library card, but she had to fix the date. So if you went just as the library opened, she'd be putting the month and the day and the year and the stamp, and then she'd test it on a piece of paper. and the floors had a special creakiness. They still have it over there. It just, when I go in there, it all wraps around me again. It's the same thing. But the most funny thing about the library, Miss Todd was very serious. You know, the straight woolen skirt and the sweater and nothing flashy. And very interested in town history, and she had a very low voice. And how are you? But I'm not sure what year she ended at the library. I think it was in the 60s. And she always dusted the shelves, but you'd walk through the shelves, and they were perpendicular to her desk. And you could look through and see what other people were looking at. You know, you could wave to your friends with the spaces. And finally, when Miss Todd retired, a new librarian took over, Carol Labrie. She lived on Railroad Avenue. They moved not long after that, but she took over, and she saw everything was neat and in order. And there were lots of spaces on the shelves. So she found a skeleton key in the desk that Marion had left. And there was a door over there. And so she tried it, and it worked. And there were more books behind the door than there were outside, because she had decided that she didn't want us reading things that weren't good for us, or with too many swear words. And so Carol said, "Oh, I don't know what to do. I've got to get them all out and dust them off." Some of the things kids had been assigned from school to read them, and but no, she meant well, and we mustn't fuss with her on that one. She wanted us to read things that would educate us and be good for us, and not indulge our basic instincts. She had a high purpose in what she was doing, and that's how it was. So that's it. I think that was the funniest thing.
I'm so excited. This is the first time somebody has on the record talked about her. Yeah. So this is fantastic.
And I asked her niece, a great niece, Cheryl, the other night. I said, "I'm going to tell." And she said, "Go ahead."
You got permission.
I have Todd approval.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. Oh, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the old building, what that was like.
Yeah. It was a charming building and a historic asset for the town, and thinking about it as an old school was always really great. But as a library, it started to become overcrowded, and it wasn't accessible with the stairs and the parking, and there were a lot of issues with it. So when I had been living in Germany with my family and came back, and that was right when there was starting to be an interest in building a new library. And I was going to story hour with my kids and started talking about what was going on. And the children's room was in the basement. It was cold. It was not well lit, and there were, kind of weird little bathrooms. So it was getting too used for the space. There were too many people. So, but there was a lot of community interest. The children's program was really active. Mrs. Chatbor was a big draw. Everyone loved it. And it was a great way to meet other moms and young families. But when I came back from Germany, that's when there was just the beginning of the building committee and the desire to look for funding, a grant from the state.
Yeah, so when I got there, the trustees had already gotten the town approval. I think they just went to different boards and groups and gave their pitch. and it was a tough sell to the town. So I know when they got the town vote, it was like a really big deal. So then when I started, my job was to help them get the state funding. So me with the trustees and the friends, it was like a whole group project, the staff and everybody. We put together this whole grant proposal, and it was kind of frantic because we had to make like so many copies of it, and it was fun, but it was frantic. And then we got state funding, and at the time only I think 6 libraries got funding out of like 50, so we were one of them. It may have been 10, I can't exactly remember, but it was a big deal and it was really exciting. So then at that point we had the town funding plus the state funding, and then we were able to go, and it was really an exciting, awesome time.
The land was donated by Ruth Lambert Cheney.
Okay.
So she that house across the street that the Youngs live in, the Youngs and Seraphins, that was this was her land, and she donated it to the town specifically for the library. So that was a huge benefit to us, because to buy land or find land would have been so expensive, and we couldn't really use the prior library site that was not big enough. And this was perfect, right at the center of town. So what I remember is it was donated to be a library, and it had to have a garden. So that's why there's that garden outside the children's room.
Oh, that's really neat.
Yeah, those are her 2 requirements.
What was it like moving everything from the old building to this new building?
Well, I mean, there are professional movers that know how to move libraries. So, but we had to sort through what we really needed to bring. And that had a lot to do with the staff and Julie being the director, deciding what was coming, what wasn't coming. And that was a huge undertaking.
One of the things that the state tells you when you build a new library is that you have to build out for 20 years, incidentally. So there has to be space on your shelves to be able to, because every year you're supposed to be getting new materials, like a certain percentage of new materials. So it was sort of double. We had to weed out what wasn't being used in the old library and bring what was here, but we also we were going from, say, like 100 shelves to like 300 shelves. I, again, don't remember the number, but so we just had to figure out the percentage of each shelf in each section. So like the children's shelves at the time were actually a higher percentage of them were filled than the adult sections, because it was just a smaller room, with a larger collection. So say that was maybe 50% of the shelves were filled in the children's room, but in the rest of the library, it was more like 30%. But then when we had the movers, we just had to say, like, this bottom shelf, like each shelf, you can only fill like 30%, so it was a little bit of organization that way, but it was fun.
So what was it like after you came here?
Well, it was a much bigger building. So, and we needed to increase hours because we wanted it to be like a community center. We wanted more people to come in, more groups to use the building. So the staff was amazing. There was not one complaint from the staff. Like there were growing pains in terms of like the building being so much bigger. And even like trying to keep track of where people came in, because there were 2 doors and how the flow was going to work and a lot of that stuff. So and then the utilities and like stuff like that, everything just changed in this building. But in terms of the staff, they were fantastic, and everybody was still very helpful and very excited in the new building and happy to come in. So it was just some daily growing pains of like people changing at the desk, keeping track of things that happened before them. And so we kept like a running notebook and stuff like that. So it was, but it was growing pains more in terms of the physical, increase than the staff, changes, if that makes sense.
Just felt so huge when we got over here. There was so much space. It was really kind of rewarding, and just seeing everything look so shiny and new. And it's held up well, I think, the furnishings, and for the most part, everything looks good. There were, that was a really upsetting controversy, but on the second floor of Town Hall, there was the stuffed bird collection, and it's a couple people on the committee thought historically that would be a nice thing to add to the library, but there was also a side of the argument that was, no, libraries are not museums and they shouldn't have permanent collections, and why would you take a portion of the collection here and not the whole thing? And so now we have some here and holes on the wall up in the second floor of Town Hall where they were taken from. And there was some discussion about were they preserved well? Are they in good shape. So, I mean, there's two sides to every story, I guess. But that was a little bit of a sad ending to a really great project because there was some controversy over that.
When my first daughter was born, I had to be home, and I was looking for something to do with my time. So I sent flyers out to all the different libraries, and I said I could run a book club, I could do a writing workshop, and Becky Shea, who was the librarian at the time, she got right back to me, and she said that at the time, the library didn't have a lot of adult programming, and she would like to try a book club. And that's how it got started. So we had one meeting at the old library. I think there were
Five or six of us. I went to the initial meeting and we were in the basement with the bright red shag carpeting. And Carla was there, and I don't remember the book.
We read, I just looked it up, Empire Falls by Elizabeth McCracken. Yes. And it was a real basement room, too. There was one window, and it was like a basement window. So not a great place to meet. And then we went on hiatus for a couple months while they finished this place. And then we came back here, and the first book we read for this library was Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. And it was small. It took a while to get going. We would have, maybe 5 members, sometimes 3 members. But the turning point, I think, for the library book club was we did a local book. I can't remember the name of it, but the writer, his name was Anthony Weller. He's from Gloucester. And it was about this part of Gloucester by the Annisquam River seceding from Massachusetts because they didn't want their bridge to be rebuilt of girders and steel. I guess it's a wooden bridge or something. I don't know. And in those days, we put up flyers. And somebody who knew Anthony Weller came through, and they saw the flyer hanging, and they called him and they said, one of the local libraries is doing your book. So he called and said, can I sit in on your discussion? And I got nervous that it would be one of those nights when only 3 people came. So I got in touch with Priscilla and some other people, and
We brought in backup.
we brought it up, but they ended up staying. So, that formed the core of the people who would show up almost every month, and that other people would come in and out.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
But that was having the author, though, posed one problem, which at the end he offered to sign the books. And of course, we all had a library copy of the book.
It was really awkward. It's like, oh, look at all those books I could sign. And we were like, oh boy.
Nobody bought any of these books.
Which was great. It was wonderful.
Essentially, Rowley's Oprah. Like you know.
We are. Yes, I like that.
Yeah, you're the tastemakers.
And we read everything. We read, science stuff and other nonfiction and history, and biography and memoir and lots of fiction.
Often what people say is in the discussion, like, I would have never picked up this book, but I actually really liked it.
Yeah.
You hear you're really going to talk about the book. You're not going to have a glass of wine and get off topic. And having the book club is like having almost a college course or a continuing education. And it's like we get the syllabus from Carla, which like these are our books for the year, and this is what we're going to read. And it's very exciting. And you know that you're going to learn, or you're going to be exposed to new ideas or new books that you wouldn't have picked up. When you finish shelving books in your page, they leave you with some projects that you can do at the front desk and everything. And so I had to stamp the museum passes because there was a school vacation coming up. So they had a brand new stamp, and they said just on the back, you stamp it says Rowley Library on there, stamp them each, and then it'll be ready for when people come in to take them. And so I'm going along and I get the whole thing done. And then I realize the new stamp, the word public was missing an L. Oh, yes. Goodness. Yes. So I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my life. And Mary thought that was hysterical too. And that will stay with me forever. I mean, that was 18 years ago. And that was one of the best work days I've ever had in my entire life.
Well, the whole thing started with when we did the library. We had some money for landscaping, but it wasn't enough to do anything out back here. And at the time, there were a large row of huge pine trees that kind of blocked the cemetery and blocked the wall. And they were okay. But of course, 20 years later, they got huge and had to come down. And when they came down, it just got invaded by invasive. It was full of invasive.
We have bittersweet vines growing, popping up everywhere, and basically overpowering everything. If you don't invade, if you don't counteract it, within 3-4 years, there's nothing left of your rhododendron or any other shrub, because that bittersweet vine will have choked the life out of any tree, any other beneficial shrub.
There's a lot of work to do all around the property, and so I was focusing mostly out front, but then I walked back here and I was like, this is not good. So I had just done this large pollinator garden at my yard. So basically it was like a 3-year process, but with the help of the town, they came and got rid of some of the biggest debris, and then volunteers and a small group of people got rid of everything that was in it, cleaned out all the invasives, all the roots, did a pitchforking, the whole length of it, and then covered it with black plastic. And that was on for like a year and a half to kill the seed. It was going to be over a winter, but then because of the drought, we left it.
We knew we couldn't plant. If we had planted all those little plugs, they would have died on us. So Mama kept all these little plugs in her property, and then we planted them later in the year when finally we did get some rain. It was just in the nick of time, and then it came back beautifully the following year, and it's an absolute sight to behold. So between May, the first flowers that bloom, and then at the end in October, November, the goldenrod, the asters. So it is a big, beautiful, lively place, which is so much needed. We do have a gorgeous cemetery, but there's nothing in there flowering. So our pollinators are literally all starving.
It was very much a kind of grab and go style thing we had all gotten used to during quarantine. People could come and get books off the to-go shelf. And you could come in and check out books, but people weren't lingering very much. It was not really the community meeting place that it is now.
So what was it like when you started up things like story time again?
It was interesting. So this was my first full-time job as the head of youth services. And we weren't really sure what to expect because we were coming out of quarantine and no one really knew what the new normal was going to be. It was very slow. We had like 1 or 2 people at first. And it was a very quick story time, like a story and a craft, just to keep people not like lingering very long in the public space.
How did you feel with the first story times?
I was very nervous. And I still get nervous at story time because you have to perform in front of people. And it can be nerve-wracking. But I think I definitely feel more at ease with it now after 3 years than I did at the very beginning.
Data-wise, how are things different now than they were then? Is there anything?
Yeah, we've seen a huge uptick, even just in the last 3 years, of people who are circulating our materials, who are accessing our online databases, and who are coming to programs. I think I just did some of the data for our little Rowley Wrapped thing, and we've gone up, in the last year alone, we got 222 new patrons, and we circulated about 6,000 items more than we did last year. So, incredible.
Last year, the friends gave about $12,000 to spring, summer, fall, all the children's programming, which is an extremely vibrant, extraordinary palette of programming that goes on at the library. So that's been wonderful that we were able to do that.
This past summer, which was just insane in the best kind of way. We had a vehicle night that saw over 700 people, which is a very large portion of people for this town. And we registered, I think the first year I did it, we had about 75 kids that did summer readings. And this past year we had about 125. So I'm hoping that we see that continue to grow as we go on.
The Rowley Library is made special by its people that come in and the librarian who are ready to welcome them.
I think more than anything, it's the people, right? It's the community. And I know that's something cliche to say, but
I think it's the sense of community that it gives to everybody in the town.
even when I was a little kid going to story time, what I remember most is the people.
It is a place to gather. It's a beautiful building. I mean, if you talk about functionality, first of all, there are places to meet. They're well lit, welcoming spaces. So you have that.
It's our local library, belongs to Rowley, and it's for everybody. It's like a service that's for everybody.
I think it gives you the opportunity to get together with people in your community.
Books are good. This is a wonderful place. And
No, there's no commerce to it. Like, we don't even have to pay overdue fees because we keep the books all month for book club. A library is a place where you can forget about the fact that things cost money. You know, you can meet with people. You can, have your kids play with toys. You can get out of the house if you're feeling really alone, and you can, be reminded of what a community really is, and taking away all of those things that revolve around money.
My life has been made richer.